I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd post something like this. I've always been the quiet one in town, the guy who mows his lawn on Saturdays, waves to his neighbors, and keeps to himself. But some things you can't bury forever, no matter how deep you dig. This all started 6 months ago, on a morning that smelled like rain and rust. Our town, Evermere, population just under 3,000, is the kind of place where nothing ever changes. The streets are named after dead generals, the diner's menu hasn't been updated since the 80s, and gossip is the only form of news. Most people live and die within 10 miles of where they were born. I used to think that was comforting. Now, I know it's because no one wants to look too closely at what's underneath. I work maintenance for the town, patching potholes, clearing storm drains, that kind of thing. It's dull but honest work. That morning, I was cleaning debris behind the old town hall, where the ground slopes toward a row of twisted willows. One of them's been dead for years, but somehow it still stands, blackened bark, hollow inside, like something preserved out of stubbornness rather than life. When I reached the back gate, I noticed a folded sheet of paper tucked into the wire fence. No envelope, no name, just 3 words printed in block letters: dig behind willow. At first, I thought it was a prank. Kids sometimes sneak around back there, spray painting or leaving bottles. But when I turned the paper over, I saw a map, crude but clear, with a red X right where the willow's roots twisted together. I should have ignored it. God knows, I wish I had. By the time I went back there that evening, the sky had that bruised, pre-storm glow. I brought a flashlight and a small spade, figuring I'd find a time capsule or a geocache or some forgotten piece of metal junk. The ground was soft, damp from last night's rain, and within minutes, I hit something hard. It wasn't a rock. It made a hollow clang like metal meeting metal. I brushed away the dirt and a corner of something rectangular appeared. My flashlight beam flickered off its surface. Corroded, but unmistakably manufactured. A box. Not a small one either, about 2 feet long, heavy enough that when I pried it free, my arms ached. It was sealed tight, with bolts at the corners and a faded inscription across the lid. At first, I thought it said a year 1975, but then I saw the full engraving. Property of Evermere Historical Society. Do not open until 2075. That should have been the end of it. I should have buried it back and walked away. But something about it, about the way it was hidden, not buried with care but forced beneath the earth, made me hesitate. It didn't feel like a civic project. It felt like a secret. I lifted the box onto the tailgate of my truck and stared at it under the flickering streetlight. My gut twisted. The bolts were rusted, but the metal beneath looked strangely new, like it hadn't aged with the soil around it. I remember running my hand over the engraving again, tracing the date, 2075. 50 years from now. What could possibly be so important that someone went through the trouble of sealing it for a century? I didn't open it that night. I drove it home, stored it in my shed, and told myself I'd call the Historical Society in the morning. But when I tried, the line didn't go through. I checked the directory. There was no listing for the Evermere Historical Society. Not online, not anywhere. That was the first thing that didn't make sense. The first of many. 2 days later, I got another note. This one wasn't left at the fence. It was slid under my front door sometime in the night. Same handwriting, same block letters. Don't open it, they're still watching. There was no signature, just a faint smudge in the corner, like a thumbprint pressed into damp ink. That's when the dream started. Every night, I'd see the willow swaying against a colorless sky. Sometimes I heard whispers, muffled voices counting numbers I couldn't understand. Other times I'd see flashes of light, like camera bulbs or lightning, followed by screams. And then silence. Always silence. I told myself it was guilt, that I'd disturbed something meant to stay buried, and my brain was inventing fear where there was none. But that didn't explain the scratches on the inside of the shed door, or how one morning I found the box moved 3 inches closer to the door than I'd left it. A week later, curiosity won. I called my friend Sam. He runs the local hardware store and has a fascination with old town legends. He brought over a toolbox and a 6-pack. Together, we decided to open the damn thing. It took nearly an hour to loosen the bolts. The metal hissed when it gave way, like air escaping after being trapped too long. The smell hit first, old paper, mildew, something metallic underneath. Inside, we found layers of yellowed newspaper wrapping bundles of letters, photographs, and what looked like a sealed cassette tape in a plastic case. Sam pulled out a folded envelope on top. It was addressed in neat handwriting. To the people of Evermere 50 years from now. Inside was a single sheet of typewritten text. If you are reading this before 2075, stop. This capsule is not for you. The events described within are to remain sealed until time permits their safe release. Please, for your sake and ours, put it back where it was found. At the bottom, there was a signature. No last name. Sam laughed nervously. Probably some Cold War paranoia thing, he said, but his voice cracked halfway through the sentence, because underneath that letter, beneath the photos and papers, there was something else. A small glass jar, sealed with wax, and inside it, a dark, thick liquid that seemed to shimmer when the flashlight hit it. Sam leaned in, squinting. What the hell is that? Before I could answer, something moved inside the jar. Just a flicker, like a thread twisting. Then, I swear to God, it pulsed. Once, like a heartbeat. That was the night everything began to unravel. The night lights began to flicker in my house. The night I heard someone whisper my name through the vent. The night I realized this wasn't just a story from the past. It was a message. And somehow it was meant for me. Chapter 1, The Mysterious Discovery I Didn't Sleep That Night. Not after what I saw in that jar. Sam left around midnight, muttering something about locking it back up in the morning. I nodded, pretending that was exactly what I planned to do, but deep down I knew there was no going back. You can't just unsee something like that. Something alive in a place where nothing living should be. After he left, I sat in the shed with a single lantern burning, staring at the capsule. The air felt heavy, like the whole room was holding its breath. I told myself I'd imagined it, that the flicker inside the jar was condensation or a trick of the light. But when I leaned closer, I could feel it. A faint vibration through the table. Like something small but deliberate was moving inside. I remember whispering out loud, "What the hell are you?" And for a moment, I swear the surface of the glass rippled, as if it had heard me. By morning, I had convinced myself it was all just nerves. I'd barely eaten, barely slept. The logical part of my brain was screaming for control, so I did what any sane man would do. I called the library. There's a local history section run by a woman named Margaret Lorne. Been there since the 1980s, knows everything about Evermere's past. I told her I'd found something unusual marked with Evermere Historical Society, and asked if she'd ever heard of it. She paused for a long time before answering. That's strange. We never had a historical society, not officially. There were some volunteers who tried forming one in the 1970s, but it disbanded after a fire. Town records were lost. Why do you ask? A fire, of course. There's always a fire in these stories. I told her it was just curiosity, nothing more. She seemed relieved to hang up, which bothered me more than it should have. Later that day, Sam texted me, "Man, I couldn't stop thinking about that jar. Maybe it's some kind of biological sample, like from a lab project. Should we test it?" That word, lab, stuck in my head. The box didn't look like something kids buried for fun. It looked official, intentional. The bolts, the reinforced metal, the warnings. Whoever made it wasn't just preserving history. They were containing something. I decided to dig deeper. Literally, I went back to the willow that night, shovel in hand, thinking maybe there was more. The ground around the roots was uneven, and the dirt had a darker color, like it had been disturbed before. I dug until my hands blistered. About 2 feet down, I hit something soft. Cloth. Maybe. I pulled it free. It was a piece of canvas, rotted and brittle, but on it were painted words in faded ready. Bury the truth before it buries us. The next few days blurred together. I couldn't focus at work. I kept replaying that night in my head. The jar, the heartbeat, the whispers. I even stopped by Sam's store to ask if he'd noticed anything strange since then. He looked rough. Pale, sleepless, hands trembling slightly as he bagged nails for a customer. "Yeah," he said when the store was empty. Strange is a word for it. My clocks keep stopping at 3:11 every night. Exact same time. And when I wake up, I swear I hear someone talking downstairs, but no one's there. We stared at each other for a long moment. Neither of us laughed it off this time. That night, I set up a camera in the shed, aimed directly at the box. I let it run while I slept, or tried to. The wind howled outside and the willow branches scraped against the siding like skeletal fingers. Around 3 a.m., the sound changed, sharper, heavier, like footsteps. The next morning, I checked the footage. At 3:11 exactly, the light in the shed flickered. Then the jar inside the capsule pulsed again, just once, and the camera's audio caught a low sound, something like a whisper too deep for human vocal cords. And right before the feed cut to static, I saw a shadow pass in front of the lens. I live alone. By the end of that week, I was desperate for answers. I drove out to the county archives in the next town, hoping to find any record of the so-called Evermere Historical Society. Nothing, but tucked in an old newspaper reel from October 1975, I found a small article that made my skin crawl. Local project delayed. Experimental preservation initiative postponed. The article mentioned a group of scientists and civic volunteers attempting to create a temporal record capsule, supposedly a time capsule using then cutting-edge technology to preserve biological samples, sound recordings, and written testimonies from local residents. The initiative was led by an engineer named Dr. Everett M. Holloway, EM, the same initials from the letter inside the capsule. But that wasn't all. Below the article was a short follow-up dated just 2 weeks later. Town Council terminates preservation project after unspecified incident. No details, no photos, just that single line. And then nothing more about Dr. Holloway. It was as if he vanished off the map. When I got home that evening, the shed door was open. I hadn't unlocked it. The jar was gone. At first, I thought Sam had come back, maybe taken it to examine it. But when I called, his wife answered. She was crying. Sam hadn't come home from work. His truck was still parked out front of the hardware store, engine cold, keys in the ignition. The police wrote it off as a disappearance. Adults have the right to vanish if they want to, they said. But I knew Sam wouldn't just walk away from his life, not without his dog, not without his truck. I went to his store the next morning, before it opened. Everything was normal, except for one thing. The clock above the counter had stopped. The time 30:11. For the next several nights, I didn't go near the shed. The wind sounded different now, like it was whispering words I almost recognized. I started hearing faint static through my phone, my radio, even my truck's speakers, always around the same time each night. When I finally gathered the nerve to check the shed again, I found a single object sitting on the table where the capsule had been, Sam's watch. It was still ticking, but the second hand was moving backward. That was when I realized the thing we'd uncovered wasn't just buried. It had been sealed away for a reason. And by opening it, we hadn't just disturbed the past. We'd invited it back. Chapter 2, Unearthing the Past After Sam Vanished. I couldn't stay in my house for more than an hour without feeling watched. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind through the willow felt like a whisper trying to form words. But running wasn't an option. Whatever we'd stirred up, it was tied to this place. If I left, I had the sickening feeling it would follow. I started with Dr. Everett M. Holloway. The county archive had only that single clipping, so I tried the state university system. Their librarian remembered the name. He worked in experimental physics, she said. Time dilation research, small-scale containment, disappeared in '76. Family never claimed his papers. She paused. You're not related, or no? I said. But something in her tone told me she didn't believe me. That night I drove to the university's storage annex. The guard barely looked up when I signed the visitor log. I told him I was cataloging boxes for the Historical Society. Funny how easily that lie came out now, like I'd inherited the name from the box itself. The storage unit smelled of paper and ozone. Rows of metal shelves disappeared into darkness. At the back, under a torn dust cover, I found a crate, Holloway Personal Projects. Inside were binders filled with schematics, typewritten notes, and grainy photographs dated July 3, 1975. Stop me cold. Objective: temporal preservation of biological memory samples. Subject: a human tissue voluntary donor. Encapsulation: medium compound EM, Everett M. Holloway, or maybe eternal memory. In the margin he'd scribbled lie. If containment fails, resonance will breach linear flow. Must bury sample at anchor site. The willow. I drove home at dawn, binder on the passenger's seat. The world outside looked drained, as if the sunrise had forgotten its color. When I stepped into my yard, the willow was moving, slowly, rhythmically. Though there was no wind, a low hum vibrated through the ground. My headlights flickered twice and died. I dug under the roots again, terrified of what I'd find, but more terrified not to know. 2 feet down, my shovel hit something solid. Another box, smaller this time, rusted nearly through. I pried it open with a crowbar. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, curled and faded, but all of the same thing: faces. Men, women, children. Some I recognized from the letters we'd found earlier. But their eyes were blurred, stretched, as if the film had melted around their pupils. And in the center of each photo, faint but visible, was that same swirling shadow I'd seen inside the jar. Whatever Holloway had sealed away, he'd taken pieces of people with it. I brought the pictures inside, spread them across my kitchen table, and tried to organize them. That's when I noticed something impossible. In one photo, a town picnic, 1975, I saw Sam, not someone who looked like him. Sam. Same scar on his chin, same crook grin. And standing beside him, half turned toward the camera, was me. I dropped the photo. My heart hammered so hard it felt like my ribs would crack. The date printed on the back read October 21, 1975, exactly 50 years before the day I found the capsule. I didn't tell the police. What could I say? That my missing friend had shown up in a 50-year-old photograph with me beside him. They already thought I was unraveling. Maybe I was. That evening I replayed the shed footage again, frame by frame. At 30:11, when the shadow crossed the lens, I paused and increased the brightness. There, for half a second, was Sam's reflection, standing behind the camera, eyes completely black. I shut the laptop and threw up in the sink. For the next week, time stopped behaving normally. My wristwatch gained minutes, then lost them. I'd look up from a task and realize hours had vanished. Once I left for work in daylight and arrived in darkness, though the drive took 10 minutes. People around town began whispering about strange lights by the willow. A mail carrier said she heard children laughing there at dawn, though the playground had been torn down decades ago. Another neighbor swore he saw 2 men digging in my yard, but when I asked who, he just said they looked like you. I needed help, so I returned to Margaret Lauren at the library. When I mentioned Holloway's name, she stiffened. "I told you that project was shut down," she said. "They said it was unsafe." "Unsafe how?" She hesitated, then led me to the basement archive. There, she pulled a folder labeled Town Hall Fire 1975. Inside were photographs of scorched walls and melted equipment. In one, through the charred doorway, I could just make out a shape. Tall, human-like, but wrong. The proportions didn't match anything living. Margaret whispered, "They said it came through the mirror." I waited for her to laugh, but she didn't. Her eyes were glassy. Holloway built something he called the echo machine. A window, not a door. But the reflection fought back. She slid another photo toward me, the same willow, young and green, surrounded by caution tape. "The town buried what was left beneath that tree," she said. That was the anchor site, to keep the resonance from spreading. I told her about the capsule, about Sam, about the heartbeat in the jar. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "You shouldn't have opened it," she whispered. "It was never meant to be found." When I left the library, the sky had turned the color of ash. The streets were empty. I could hear a faint hum beneath my feet, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. Every window I passed reflected not me, but an older version, my hair gray, my eyes hollow. And behind that reflection, standing in the distance, was Sam. I ran home. The binder lay open on the table. Holloway's notes fluttered in a wind that wasn't there. On the last page, scrawled in frantic pen, were words that hadn't been there before. "Resonance's breached anchor. The past is watching. Seal all mirrors. If you read this, run." I looked up, and across the room, my television flickered to life on its own. Static filled the screen. Then, slowly, the image resolved into the willow tree, swaying under a starless sky. The sound that came next wasn't human. It was the hum, amplified, layered with voices repeating one phrase over and over until it merged into a single, unbearable command: "Unearth the rest." Chapter 3, the contents revealed. The night the voices told me to unearth the rest, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the willow bending toward the house, its branches tapping the glass like fingers demanding to be let in. When I did drift off, I dreamed of the photographs. The blurred eyes, the shadows swallowing faces. Until even in sleep, I wasn't sure which world I was in. By morning, I'd made up my mind. Whatever was buried there had already begun to leak through. If I didn't dig it all up, maybe it would finish the job itself. The air outside had that thick, metallic stillness before a storm. The clouds were low, almost pressing on the roofs, and everything, the grass, the air, even the dirt, smelled like ozone. I set up a camera on a tripod aimed at the willow, just like Sam had before. This time, I wanted evidence of what I saw. Or maybe proof I wasn't insane. I started to dig. The soil was softer than before, almost loose, as though something had been tunneling through it. Within minutes, the shovel hit something hollow. A dull, metallic thud echoed up the handle. I wiped away the dirt with my hands. There wasn't just one container. There were several, smaller, nested boxes, half swallowed by roots. The first one was wood, sealed with a brass clasp. Inside, a child's shoe, cracked and stiff with age. A photograph of the old town square. And another note, written on yellowed paper in a hand that was somehow both trembling and deliberate. Subject B, retention successful. Emotional tether intact, anchor stability compromised. The next box was metal heavier. It groaned as I forced the lid open. Inside were more cassette tapes, each labeled with a date between 1973 and 1975. There were 9 of them in total, all labeled with initials, RAEMJD, and one labeled SC, Sam's initials. That shouldn't have been possible. The final container was glass, sealed with what looked like wax that had melted and hardened countless times. Inside floated another jar, smaller and darker, the liquid inside almost black. Something moved within it, slow, coiling, like smoke trapped underwater. For a moment, the hum in the ground stopped. Then, a heartbeat later, it started again, louder this time, so deep it rattled my teeth. I didn't realize I'd been crying until I saw the tears falling into the dirt. Every instinct screamed to bury it all again, but the other voice, the whisper beneath the hum, kept repeating, "Play the tapes." So I did. I brought the box inside, washed the dirt from my hands, and set the first cassette into an old tape deck I'd found in the garage. The reel clicked, whirred, then began to play. static first. Then a man's voice, calm, professional, unmistakably Holloway's test number 23. Subject B demonstrates increased recall and temporal alignment. Audio tether established. Resonance stable for 12 minutes before fragmentation event. A pause. Then if this works, time won't be linear anymore. It will be a loop, a reflection in motion. The tape distorted. Another voice overlapped Holloway's, younger, uncertain. Sir, what happens to the subjects afterward? A faint chuckle. Afterward doesn't exist. Not in the way you think. The rest was static and a faint sound like whispering behind a wall. The second tape was worse. This one was all crying. A woman's voice, distant, pleading. Please, stop the machine. It's showing me faces. I know them. They're all. The tape snapped mid-sentence. The third tape didn't even need playback. The moment I inserted it, the TV in the living room flickered on again, showing static. And then, just like before, the willow appeared. Only this time I could see two figures standing beneath it. Both of them digging. One was Sam. The other was me, except this me was older, much older. His hair was gray, his face sunken, and when he turned toward the camera, his mouth was moving silently. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read them. Don't finish it. I tore the tape from the deck, but the whispering didn't stop. It was everywhere now, inside the walls, the floor, even the air. Each whisper carried fragments of voices from the tapes crying, laughter, someone counting backward. And over it all, Holloway's voice, the anchor must hold. If breached, the loop becomes permanent. Permanent. That word echoed through me. Was that what this was? A time loop? Was that why Sam appeared in the old photographs? Why I'd seen myself beside him? Had Holloway trapped us in whatever he'd built? A looping fragment of 1975 bleeding into now. I needed answers. I drove to the Historical Society again, binder under my arm, heart racing. When I arrived, the building was empty. The lights were on, but no one was there. Margaret's desk was overturned, papers scattered across the floor, and on the far wall, written in what looked like charcoal, were the words, "Anchor failed." Behind the desk lay a photograph, fresh, still glossy. It showed me standing under the willow that morning, shovel in hand staring directly at the camera. I hadn't taken it. I turned it over, and scrawled on the back in shaking handwriting were the words, "You opened the wrong box." I drove home as the sky began to break open. Lightning flickered behind the clouds, but no thunder followed. Just the hum, louder than ever now, so constant it blended into thought. When I reached my driveway, I froze. The willow was gone. Not cut down, not burned. Just gone. In its place was a wide circular depression, like the ground itself had been pulled inward. The edges glowed faintly, pulsating like a heartbeat. And at the center, where the roots had been, something shimmered. A faint outline, a doorway made of air and static. I heard Sam's voice then. Not from the house, not from memory, but from everywhere. Come see what we buried. Inside the shimmering air, I saw flashes, glimpses of the town as it had been, children running through streets lined with vintage cars, posters for the bicentennial celebration, and there, in the square, Dr. Everett Holloway himself, standing beside the willow as it once was. He was smiling, holding the same glass jar I'd found. He turned toward me as if he could see me across time, and mouthed two words. It worked. The hum rose to a scream. The air rippled. I felt myself pulled forward, the ground vanishing beneath my feet. The last thing I saw before everything went black was my camera, still recording, red light blinking, capturing the exact moment I disappeared. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in daylight. The willow was back, so was the dirt pile untouched. My hands were clean, my shovel still in the shed. Everything was normal, except for one thing. On the porch, resting neatly against the door, was a sealed glass jar. Inside it floated the same black mist. And taped to the lid was a note written in my own handwriting, "Don't dig again." Chapter 4, Stories Untold. I didn't move for a long time. Just stood there on the porch, staring at the jar. The note taped to it was unmistakably mine. Same slanted, same hurried loops. Except I had never written it. Not yet, anyway. The morning air was still. No birds, no cars, not even the hum of power lines. Evermere had gone quiet, as if the whole town was holding its breath again. I reached for the jar, then stopped halfway. The black mist inside seemed to react to my movement, swirling faster like it was watching me. That's when I noticed something else. My camera, still recording, was sitting a few feet away, its red light blinking steadily. I knelt down, hit playback. The footage started with my backyard empty. Then, without transition, I appeared, the same me that had vanished. I looked confused, terrified. I bent down, placed the jar on the porch, wrote the note, and walked back toward the willow. But instead of disappearing, I stopped mid-stride, looked directly into the lens, and said, clear as day, this is the last time. Don't try to change it again. Then the video glitched, frames repeating backward, forward, backward. until the image fractured into static. The hum returned that night. It started in the walls, low and constant, like the sound of distant machinery. I tried sleeping with music playing, but every song distorted after a few seconds, turning into the same faint whispering. At 3:11 a.m., the power cut out. I grabbed a flashlight and checked the breaker. Everything was fine. But when I turned back, someone was standing at the end of the hallway. For a split second, I thought it was Sam. But the figure was wrong, longer somehow, its posture bent at impossible angles, its face blurred like the photographs from the capsule. "Sam," I whispered. The thing tilted its head, and the whispering grew louder. Thousands of overlapping voices, each one saying a different word, none of them human. When I blinked, it was gone. I started finding letters around the house the next day. Old yellowing, but all in envelopes postmarked from 1975. Each was addressed to resident 14 Willow Lane, my address. The first read, "We didn't mean to trap them." The resonance loop was unstable, but Holloway said it would hold. It didn't. "If you find this, don't open anything marked with the seal." The seal, the circle within a triangle symbol from the capsule. The next letter was shorter. "He's learning. He can see us now. Time isn't what it used to be." By the fifth letter, I realized they were written by different people. Different handwriting, different ink, but all from the same year. It was as if the entire town had known. They'd buried their mistake under the willow and erased it from history. The local newspaper confirmed it. The microfilm from October 1975 had been tampered with. Frames missing, words blacked out. But I found one surviving line in the classified section: "Volunteers needed for community preservation experiment." Dr. E.M. Holloway, no address, no contact number. But below that was a strange note in pen, likely from a librarian decades ago: "Do not remove this reel. Distortion present." Distortion, that word again. I rented a portable reel viewer, brought it home, and played the damaged section frame by frame. Halfway through, the image warped into a swirl of static. Then, clear for 1 second, was a shot of the willow tree as it looked then, younger, smaller. Behind it stood dozens of people, hands joined, faces turned toward the camera. Each one smiling, each one with their eyes blacked out. The film melted in the projector before I could rewind it. By the next week, the town had started changing. Street names shifted overnight. Houses appeared older, as if they'd been left abandoned for years. The grocery store sign now read, "Holloway's Market," a name that had never existed before. When I asked around, people looked at me blankly, like they'd never heard of Sam, or Margaret, or even the willow tree. The mayor's office was gone. In its place was an old municipal hall with boarded-up windows. And there, on one of the doors, was the seal again, circle and triangle burned into the wood. I started recording everything, keeping notes, but each morning my journal was rewritten. Entries crossed out, rewritten in different handwriting. Once, an entire page was filled with the same line: "Hay's almost through." I went back to the willow one last time. The ground was still sunken, the faint shimmer gone, but the jar I'd left inside the house was now sitting in the dirt, lid cracked. The mist inside was gone. Instead, faint handprints covered the inside of the glass, too small to be mine. Children's hands. I remembered the shoe from the second box. Subject B. Had Holloway used the townspeople as experiments? Was this Evermere itself the experiment? I didn't get the chance to finish the thought. Because then, from the trees, I heard laughter. Faint, childlike, echoing from everywhere and nowhere at once. And with it, the voice of Dr. Holloway, calm and clear as if he were standing right beside me. The loop must complete itself. History resists deletion. I looked down at the dirt and realized my shadow was missing. That was 3 days ago. Since then, the sun hasn't risen. The clocks still work, but they don't move past 3C11. The town's gone quiet again, like before a storm. I can see lights flickering near the willow, faint shapes, people standing shoulder to shoulder, whispering. Sometimes I think I recognize their faces: Sam, Margaret, my older self. They're all watching me, waiting. I think I understand now. The capsule wasn't a message from the past, it was a door. And when I opened it, I became the final subject. If anyone finds this recording, if Evermere still exists in your time, don't come looking for the capsule. Don't come looking for me. Because when the hum begins again, that means the loop is starting over, and the next version of me will already be digging. Chapter 5 echoes through time and future hopes. If you're hearing this, it means the hum has stopped. At least for a while. That means you still have time to listen. I'm recording this from what used to be my house. Now it's something else. A structure caught halfway between decades. The wallpaper flickers between patterns. The furniture changes shape when I blink. And sometimes I see the outline of people frozen mid-movement, like film negatives burned into air. I've stopped trying to understand it. I just record. The town of Evermere isn't gone, it's repeating. Every 48 hours it loops, resets back to October 25th, 1975, the day the capsule was sealed. The day Holloway completed the experiment. I found his last tape inside what was once the town library, now half merged with the old church. The tape was labeled simply Anchor Protocol Final. I listened to it 3 times before I could believe what I was hearing. To preserve consciousness through temporal resonance, we must create a stable loop of observation, Holloway said, his voice calm, clinical. Each participant's memory becomes part of the circuit. If one link fails, if one stops observing, the entire structure collapses. Evermere will be the anchor. A living archive. They won't die. They'll repeat forever. He thought he was saving them. He thought eternity meant preservation. He never considered what living the same 2 days for 50 years might do to a soul. The townspeople aren't ghosts. They're echoes. Each loop leaves a residue. Faint, emotional, self-aware fragments trying to make sense of their confinement. That's why I could still hear Sam. Why Margaret's letters appeared. They weren't communicating from the dead. They were bleeding through the echo. Every loop births a new observer. A new me drawn in when someone disturbs the capsule. That's how it keeps itself stable. The town trades consciousness for continuity. And the more we try to fix it, the deeper the echo burns. I think I was the last one to join the circuit. And maybe the last one who can end it. 3 nights ago, I tried something different. Instead of resisting the hum, I followed it. The vibration led me back to the willow, still there, impossibly alive, though its roots now stretch across the street like veins. At its base was the jar again, sealed and faintly glowing from within. I could see Holloway's face in the reflection. He looked calm, proud. I realized he wasn't a ghost either. He was another echo, maybe the first one. I asked him what he'd done. He didn't speak, but the jar began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. And then, just for an instant, I saw the entire timeline, not forward or backward, but spiraling inward, collapsing into the center of Evermere. Every moment, every repetition, every life, folding into one endless heartbeat. That's when I understood. There's no destroying the loop, but I could rewrite the anchor. The hum is changing now. It's softer, slower, almost peaceful. The town's lights are dimming, like dusk stretched over eternity. I can see the figures gathering near the willow. Sam, Margaret, even the children from the photographs. They're all smiling this time. And I think they're waiting for me. If I walk into the willow's light, I'll become part of the anchor. Not as an echo, but as something else, a new observer, someone who remembers everything. Maybe that's what Holloway wanted from the beginning. Not eternal life, but eternal memory. A record of who we were, looping until someone else is ready to learn. If you ever find Evermere, if your road takes you through the valley, and you see a town that shouldn't exist, don't stop. Don't look for the willow. Don't touch the earth beneath it. But if you do, and the hum begins to rise, and you hear the whispers calling your name, then know this, you've become part of the story now. You are the observer. You are the next anchor. And through you, Evermere will never be forgotten.